They called her the Queen of Hollywood, a woman with a spine of steel who brought the industry to its knees. We admired her toughness and sharpness, seeing it as the pinnacle of strength. But what if I told you her entire life was a severe mental disorder? This invincible woman beat her colleagues on set, emasculated her husbands, and turned her life into an isolated bunker. And as she lay dying of cancer, the one person she built this fortress for, her own daughter, stabbed her in the back by publishing a book that shattered her mother. Today, we'll dissect the most terrifying myth of the 20th century and prove a chilling theorem: why strength without vulnerability is always a death sentence. You think you know what strength is. Since childhood, we've been fed the same idea. The world is a dangerous place, a jungle where the sharpest survive, not the kindest. We were told tears are the currency of losers. That vulnerability is an open door for the enemy. That you need skin as thick as a tank's armor, learn to bite before you're bitten, and never, under any circumstances, show where it hurts. We've built a cult around this idea. We called it character, backbone, guts of steel. And the main icon of this cult in the 20th century was a woman 5'3", with eyes like saucers of poison and a voice like tearing sandpaper. Bette Davis, the Queen of Warner Brothers, the woman who brought Hollywood to its knees, a force who couldn't be broken. We look at her black and white photos, holding a cigarette like it's a dagger, and think, that's power. I want to be that invincible. But it's a lie. The greatest optical illusion in show business. What we've mistaken for strength over decades was actually the most elaborate, tragic, and prolonged form of self-destruction in cultural history. We're about to do what biographers, blinded by the shine of her 2 Oscars, haven't. We'll perform an autopsy not on the body, but on the persona of Bette Davis to prove a chilling theorem. Strength without vulnerability is a pathology. The story you're about to hear isn't a biography of a Hollywood star. Forget about film release dates and box office numbers. This is the anatomy of survival that went too far. It's the story of how a little frightened girl donned heavy knight's armor to shield herself from pain, but never managed to take it off when the war ended. She wore it for 50 years until it fused with her skin, until the metal began to poison her blood, and until she found herself utterly alone inside that indestructible fortress. But before we take the first step, a small request. This story will be tough, and I need your support to ensure the algorithms show it to those who truly need it. Hit like if you're ready for an honest conversation about the price of success. Subscribe and hit that damn bell. Here we uncover what other biographers keep silent about, and you definitely don't want to miss the next episode. I also invite you to become my co-author in the comments. I've sifted through hundreds of documents, but I can be wrong. See an inaccuracy? Have a different take on this story? Or disagree with something? Don't stay silent. Write what you think. And now, we begin our descent into the hell Bette Davis built with her own hands. And believe me, it's very cold in this hell. Act 1. Childhood trauma and maternal programming. To understand why a soldier sleeps with a gun under his pillow, you need to know what happened before the war. Bette Davis's character, legendary, explosive, unbearable, wasn't some innate flaw or heavenly gift. It was a man-made mechanism, a complex piece of engineering designed by one specific architect. That architect was Ruth Davis, her mother. It all started with the initial wound, the moment psychologists call the breaking point. Bette was only 7 when her father, Harlow Davis, packed his bags and left. He didn't just leave for another woman or another life. He left them. For a little girl, a father's departure is a cosmic message. You're not good enough for me to stay. You're not worth fighting for. In these situations, kids usually pick one of two paths. They either retreat into themselves, becoming quiet and invisible, or they try to earn love through perfect obedience. But Ruth Davis, left alone with 2 daughters, in poverty and fear, chose a third path for Bette, the path of war. Ruth wasn't just a mother. She was Ruth with a capital R. A woman with an unyielding will and a broken heart, determined her daughters would never repeat her fate. She sat little Bette down and, figuratively speaking, began pouring concrete into her ears, laying the foundation of her personality. The lesson was simple and brutal. Men are unreliable. Your father left us because we were weak. The world will try to devour you, Bette. The only person you can rely on is yourself. You must become someone. You must become so great, so strong, and indispensable that no one will ever dare leave you again. And if they try to walk away, you strike first. It was a poison injection disguised as medicine. Ruth instilled in her daughter that love wasn't a gift, but a trophy. That safety was guaranteed only by dominance. Her mother became everything to Bette. Father, mentor, manager, and main audience. A frightening symbiotic bond formed between them. Ruth sacrificed her personal life, working as a photographer, governess, whatever it took to pay for Bette's dance and acting lessons. This placed a colossal, nearly unbearable debt on young Davis. She couldn't afford mistakes. Every success was paid for with her mother's sweat and blood. She couldn't just be an actress. She had to become Bette Davis, a weapon of retribution for all of Ruth's humiliations. It was then, in her teenage years, that Bette began forging her first armor. She noticed that when she was sweet and compliant, she was ignored. But when she showed character, when she shouted, when she demanded, people got scared. But they listened. She developed a formula that would become her life's motto. Aggression is the best form of defense. If you attack, the opponent has no time to find your weaknesses. With this weapon in hand, eyes blazing, and her mother's blessing, 22-year-old Bette Davis boarded a train heading west. She was going to conquer Hollywood. But she didn't know that Hollywood in the 30s wasn't a place for someone like her. It was a meat grinder set for a completely different kind of meat. Act 2, the battle for Hollywood and the ugly strategy. We often romanticize the golden age of Hollywood. We picture spotlights, champagne, elegant gentlemen, and femme fatales draped in silk. Reality was far more brutal and mundane. The studio system of the 30s operated like an industrial conveyor belt. Actors weren't creators, they were property. Literally. Signing a contract meant selling your face, your voice, your body, and your soul for 7 years. They dictated what to wear, who to sleep with, who to marry, and how to smile. Into this world of standardized beauty stepped Bette Davis. Her arrival in Los Angeles marked her first collision with reality. Universal Studios sent an employee to meet their new starlet at the station. The employee returned alone. "Where is she?" asked the producer. "I found no one," the guy replied. "I was looking for an actress." But no one resembling an actress got off the train. There was just some plain girl with her mother and a dog. It was a gut punch. Bette Davis was off-brand. She didn't possess Mary Gregory's doll-like beauty. She lacked Jean Harlow's sexual magnetism. She had bulging eyes, a result of an overactive thyroid, sharp features, a small chest, and a nervous, jittery movement. Carl Laemmle, head of Universal, upon seeing her for the first time, uttered a phrase that could have destroyed any other woman. She has the sex appeal of Slim Somerville, a lanky, awkward comedian with a horse-like face. Imagine how a young girl feels when told daily she's ugly, unsexy, a casting mistake. The usual reaction is to break, go home, cry into a pillow, get plastic surgery. Bette Davis chose a different path. Her mother's mechanism kicked in. "Oh, you think I'm ugly?" she thought. "Fine. I'll make you eat this ugliness by the spoonful. I'll be so intense, so terrifyingly talented, you'll forget what I look like. You'll be watching not my face, but my exposed nerve, which I'll turn inside out right in front of the camera." In 1932, she landed at Warner Brothers. This wasn't just a studio. It was a maximum security prison run by Jack Warner, a man whose management philosophy boiled down to actors are cattle. Warner loved gangster films, gritty dramas, and cutting costs. Bette fit perfectly into this world, but not as a docile sheep. She was a wolf accidentally penned in. Here, her unique acting style took shape, a sublimation of her rage. Look at her early roles, like in the 1934 film of Human Bondage. She plays Mildred, a waitress, vulgar, cruel, a repulsive woman who destroys the protagonist. Producers begged her to soften the character. "Bette, you need to be at least a bit appealing, or the audience will hate you." But Davis stood her ground. She devised her own makeup. A pale face, messy hair, a crookedly painted mouth. She acted with such ferocity, such venomous energy, it made the audience physically uncomfortable. It was a revolutionary moment. Before Bette Davis, actresses feared being unlikable. They wanted to be loved. Bette Davis wanted to be remembered. She used the role of Mildred as an act of preemptive disfigurement. She seemed to say, "I know you don't like me, so I'll be worse than you can imagine. I control the degree of my ugliness." And it worked. Critics were shocked, but they admitted it was genius. She didn't win an Oscar for that role, though she should have. It was a scandal when she wasn't even nominated, forcing the Academy to change the rules on the fly due to press outrage. But she gained something more. She got validation for her strategy. Being a bitch is profitable. Being tough is safe. The more I scare people, the more they respect me. Thus, the first plates of her legendary armor were forged. But she didn't yet know that this armor had a side effect. It began to press on her chest, making it hard to breathe. And the first to feel the chill of this metal weren't the producers, but the men who had the misfortune to fall in love with her. Act 3. Personal Life Catastrophe. Bette Davis was a paradox. On set, she was the Iron Lady. At home, she dreamed of being just a woman, vulnerable, protected, loved. She craved a patriarchal idol, a strong husband, a cozy home, smart conversations by the fireplace. But the code her mother wrote, and the habits forged in her war with Jack Warner, made that dream impossible. Her personal life turned into a nuclear testing ground. She had 4 husbands, each marriage following the same destructive script. First was Ham Nelson, her high school sweetheart, a jazz musician, a sweet, easygoing guy with no ambition to be a star. In the early 30s, it seemed like the perfect match, but Bette's career rocketed while Ham's stalled. In Bette's world, love meant respect for strength. How could she respect a man making $100 a week when she was bringing home 3,000. She started to emasculate him. Morally, picture a scene fit for the darkest film. Bette returns from the studio, electrified after another fight with Warner. She needs to burn off adrenaline. She sees Ham reading a newspaper. "You just gonna sit there?" Her voice already has a metallic edge. "I just secured the budget for a new film, and you can't even fix a faucet." She didn't just nag him, she destroyed him. She made all the decisions. She bought the houses, the cars, the furniture. She became the man of the house and hated Ham for letting her take that place. It's the classic Amazon complex trap. A woman seeks a hero, her equal in strength, to battle. If he surrenders, like Ham, she despises him. If he wins, she fears him and destroys him to regain control. The end with Ham was humiliating. She had an abortion because a child would interfere with filming, not even discussing it with him. For Ham, it was the last straw. He filed for divorce and Bette was left alone. Did it hurt? Absolutely, but her armor was on autopilot. He was weak, she told herself. Mom was right. Men leave. Only work remains. Her next attempts at family were even more disastrous. Her second husband, Arthur Farnsworth, died under mysterious circumstances after a fall. Rumors swirled that Bette had pushed him during a fight, though there was no proof. The third, William Sherry, was an artist and a sadist who beat her. Strangely, in this marriage, Bette felt most alive for a while. Violence, she understood. Violence was the language she'd spoken since childhood. Fights with Sherry were an extension of her battles on screen. But even this twisted union crumbled when Sherry chose their daughter's nanny over her. Bette Davis was stuck in a vicious cycle. Her need to dominate, which saved her in Jack Warner's office, killed any intimacy in the bedroom. She wanted to be held, but her body was covered in spikes. Anyone who tried to get close got hurt and ran away. And there she stood, in the middle of an empty living room, cigarette in hand, convincing herself, "I don't need anyone. I am Bette Davis." Act 4, Rebellion against the system and the birth of a great feud. But the most terrifying battle lay ahead. A battle that would define her legacy and become the longest, bloodiest spectacle in Hollywood history. A battle with her own reflection. While Bette's personal life crumbled, she prepared for a professional suicide mission that would forever alter Hollywood's rules. The year was 1936. Bette Davis was a rising star. She'd just snagged her first Oscar for Dangerous, though everyone knew it was a consolation prize for being snubbed for Of Human Bondage. You'd think she'd be happy, cashing in and smiling for the cameras. But Bette was furious. The reason for her rage? Scripts. Jack Warner kept sending her trash. Roles of flat, dull girlfriends, B-movie parts shot in 2 weeks. For Davis, this was a personal insult. I don't bare my soul to play furniture," she'd scream in Warner's office, hurling scripts at the wall. Ashtrays flew, secretaries ducked under desks. Warner laughed. He knew she had a contract. She was his property. If she refused to act, he'd extend her contract for the downtime. It was bondage. No way out. So Bette Davis did the unthinkable. She ran. She boarded a ship and sailed to London to make films, breaking her Warner Brothers contract. It was a galley slave's revolt. No one, absolutely no one, dared challenge the studio system then. It was a corporate machine with billion-dollar turnover, an army of lawyers, and mob connections. Warner sued. The trial took place in London. It was a public beating. The studio's lawyers, Britain's best sharks, tore Bette apart on the stand. They painted her as a spoiled, greedy, ungrateful girl who'd gotten too big for her britches. "Miss Davis," the lawyer asked slyly, "you earn $3,000 a week. That's more than the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And you call this slavery?" "It's slavery," she replied, lips trembling but eyes blazing. "If I'm forced to do what kills my talent. I'm not a doll, I'm an actress." She lost the case. Badly. The judge ordered her back to the United States to work off every penny of her contract. Plus, she had to cover massive legal fees. She returned to America bankrupt, humiliated, crushed. The press gloated. Bette Davis tucks her tail. But here's where the miracle happens, explaining the essence of the Bette Davis phenomenon and her armor. When she walked into Jack Warner's office expecting to be fired or fined, he stood up and hugged her. He wrote a check covering all her legal debts. Why? Because Jack Warner was a gangster in the movie business. He respected only strength. He saw what this woman was capable of. He understood. If she was willing to defy the system, risk everything for quality roles, she was more than a pretty face. She was a fighter. She was just like him. "This bitch is worth every cent," he told his partners. From that moment, Bette Davis's golden era began. Warner gave her what she wanted. The best scripts, the best directors, the best budgets. She lost the court battle but won the war for respect. Her armor withstood a direct artillery hit, and she learned a lesson that became her curse. Conflict is the only way to get what you want. The world hears you only when you scream. And so, at the height of her fame, armed to the teeth, Bette Davis found the perfect enemy, an enemy she needed like air. Joan Crawford. History sold us their feud as a tawdry catfight over men, specifically over actor Franchot Tone, whom Bette loved but Joan supposedly seduced in her trailer, naked. But reducing their relationship to jealousy misses the depth of both their psychologies. It wasn't jealousy. It was an existential hatred of the other self. Look at them. They were perfect opposites. Bette Davis, the actress, an intellectual from the East Coast. The one who scorned glamour, who was willing to look ugly for a role. The one who believed art should be truthful, not beautiful. Joan Crawford, the star, a product of MGM Studios. A woman who reinvented herself from scratch, creating her name, face, biography. A woman who even took out the trash in diamonds and heels because you never know who might see you. Bette publicly scorned Crawford. She called her a mannequin with eyebrows, a fake, a conveyor belt product. Joan Crawford's tear ducts are connected to her bladder, Davis sneered. She cries on command, but there's not a drop of feeling in it. Why did Bette spend so much energy hating a hollow shell? Because Joan Crawford embodied everything Bette lacked and could never have. Crawford had an easy, sensual beauty. Men loved her. She knew how to be a dream woman, not a problem woman. Looking at Joan, Bette saw her secret, suppressed side. The little girl who wanted to be just a pretty princess, not a warrior in heavy armor. This hatred was a defense mechanism. To justify her choice, to be serious and complex, Bette had to devalue Joan's choice, to be glamorous and superficial. She had to convince herself, what she does is cheap. What I do is art. If she ever allowed herself to think Crawford was talented too, and Crawford was damn talented, remember, Mildred Pierce, Bette's self-esteem structure would collapse. Crawford, in turn, feared Davis to her core. She envied her intellect, her background, her natural gift for playing complex emotions effortlessly. Joan sent Bette gifts, flowers, trying to win her over. Bette sent them back. "She's trying to buy me like a cheap whore," Davis scoffed. In reality, Crawford was trying to buy recognition. But Bette's armor had no opening for mercy. Their feud smoldered for years, fueled by the press. It was Hollywood's Cold War. Two superpowers watching each other through barbed wire, stockpiling nuclear sarcasm, waiting for the moment to press the red button. And that moment would come. But later. Act 5. Fear of aging, desperation, and whatever happened to Baby Jane. By 1950, the battlefield had shifted. Bette Davis hit 42. In Hollywood back then, that was the death knell. Actresses over 40 were tossed aside, playing grandmas or witches. Davis's career was on the decline. Warner Brothers, the studio she made legendary, cut her loose. Jack Warner sent a telegram, blunt as a sledgehammer. "You're old. We don't need you. Get lost." She sat in her mansion, divorced, jobless, feeling like history's trash. Then fate, in the form of director Joseph Mankiewicz, tossed her a script that mirrored her own tragedy. The film All About Eve, the plot, a great but aging theater star, Margot Channing, faces off against a young, ambitious predator, Eve Harrington, who aims to steal her career, her men, her life. Bette Davis read the script and knew. She didn't need to act. She was living it. Margot Channing was her. Sharp, witty, talented, but terrified her time was slipping away. The film's shoot became legend. Did you notice Bette Davis's voice in All About Eve? That famous, low, gravelly rasp? It wasn't a performance choice. In the early days of filming, Bette was so nervous she screamed at her new lover, future fourth husband, Gary Merrill, until her throat's blood vessels burst. Her voice dropped. Mankiewicz wanted to halt filming to let her recover. "No," Bette rasped. "Leave it. This voice is perfect for the old, smoked-out, tired bitch I'm playing." She turned her physical injury into an artistic tool. This was her armor's peak. Even when her body broke, it broke to serve the role. The film's climax is the staircase scene, where Margot delivers the immortal line, "Fasten your seatbelts." It's going to be a bumpy night. We all know the line, but rewatch the scene. Look not at her mouth, but at Bette Davis's eyes. There's no triumph. There's panic. She looks at her young lover Bill like a beaten dog. She's brash, she's rude. She downs a martini, but inside she's screaming, "Please don't leave me. I know I'm difficult. I know I'm aging, but please love me." The film ends with a happy ending for the heroine. Margot Channing finds strength to shed her ego, accepts her age, and finds peace in marriage. She removes her armor. Reality was the opposite. Bette Davis married Gary Merrill, adopted kids, tried to play the happy wife role. But she couldn't become Margot Channing. She couldn't take off the crown. She brought the competition from the set into her home. She started competing with her own husband. When his career stalled and she was invited to festivals, she didn't comfort him. She unconsciously crushed him with her greatness. "I'm Bette Davis. And who are you?" This unspoken, sometimes spoken question hung in the air, poisoning their home. All About Eve was her last great triumph as a dramatic heroine. After it began a long, painful decline, an era where the armor started to rust and turn into a torture device. The 60s were coming, the time of rock and roll, sexual revolution, and The time for Bette Davis's most terrifying career experiment. Time to become a monster for real. Early 60s. The world changed. Theaters played Elvis Presley and beach party flicks. Old Hollywood was dying, and with it, its gods. Bette Davis, a divorced woman, single mother, bankrupt, 54 years old. The phone silent. Agents not calling back. In 1962, she did something that made all of Hollywood gasp in shame. She placed an ad in Variety's Situations Wanted section. The text read, "Mother of 3, divorced, American, 30 years in film, mobile, still more alive than you'd think, seeks steady work in Hollywood, has references, was on Broadway." Imagine the level of desperation. A woman with 2 Oscars at home, forced to place an ad like an unemployed waitress. The industry laughed. Look how far the great Bette has fallen. But it wasn't just an act of humiliation. It was, in her style, an act of aggression. It was a middle finger to the entire industry. She was saying, "Ashamed of me? Great. I'll make you uncomfortable until you give me a job." And the job came. But it was an offer anyone with a shred of pride would refuse. The script was called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. A story of 2 aging sisters, locked in a house full of hatred for each other. One, a wheelchair-bound invalid. The other, a mad woman, a former star who torments her sister. Director Robert Aldrich knew what he was doing. He wasn't looking for actresses to play hate. He wanted actresses who felt hate. For the role of the invalid Blanche, they cast Joan Crawford. For the role of the Mad Jane, they cast Bette Davis. Thus began the most terrifying psychological experiment in film history. The making of this film wasn't art. It was war, captured on film. Aldrich understood. For the film to succeed, he needed to pit 2 tigresses in one cage. Every night he called one and told her the nasty things the other supposedly said about her. But Bette Davis went further. She decided to use this film to physically destroy Joan Crawford. First, Bette tackled her appearance. Makeup artists suggested standard aging makeup. "No," Bette said. "I need to look like a parody of a woman, like Mary Pickford, rotted alive." She applied this monstrous layer of white herself. She rimmed her eyes with thick black liner. She painted her mouth like a bleeding wound. When she first appeared on set in this guise, Joan Crawford, always immaculate even as a victim, nearly fainted. Bette Davis destroyed her face to show her character's inner ugliness. This was her armor's ultimate form. "I'll become a monster on the outside so you can't hurt me inside." There's a scene in the film where Jane kicks Blanche while she's on the floor. By all safety rules, the kick should be fake, or a double should be used. Bette insisted on doing it herself. The camera rolled. Bette swung and kicked Joan in the head. For real. Crawford screamed. Filming stopped. Joan demanded stitches, though the wound was small. Bette just lit a cigarette and said, "I barely touched her." Another drama from Miss Pepsi Cola. Crawford was the widow of Pepsi's president and placed soda machines everywhere, which infuriated Bette. But Crawford didn't take it lying down. In a scene where Bette had to drag her paralyzed body across the floor, Joan, knowing Davis had a bad back, wore a belt with heavy lead weights, or by another account, stuffed her dress pockets with stones. When Bette tried to lift her, she strained her back. You can see the effort in the film. The scream of pain on Davis's face is real. They mutilated each other for the shot. They sublimated their hatred of aging, the industry, men, onto each other. The film came out and was a sensation. It saved both their careers, but it also locked them into new roles. Crawford remained the eternal victim. Davis became the eternal executioner. The climax of their war wasn't on set, but at the Oscars. This episode should be in psychopathology textbooks. The situation, for Baby Jane, Bette Davis was nominated for Best Actress. Joan Crawford wasn't. For Crawford, it was public humiliation. Her enemy got recognition, and she got nothing. Bette was triumphant. She was sure of victory. She rehearsed her speech. She believed she'd become the first actress in history to win 3 statuettes. It would be the ultimate proof. Talent beat beauty. But Joan Crawford launched a campaign worthy of Machiavelli. She couldn't win herself. So she decided to make sure Bette lost. Crawford contacted all the other nominees, Anne Bancroft, Geraldine Page, who couldn't attend the ceremony. Joan sweetly offered, "Darling, if you win, let me accept the award on your behalf. It would be an honor for me." The actresses agreed, and so the night of the ceremony arrived. Bette Davis stood backstage, nervously fidgeting with her gloves. Joan Crawford stood nearby, in a dazzling silver dress, with a shark's smile. They announced the winner. And the Oscar goes to Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. Bette froze. Shock. Silence. And in that second, she felt the icy touch. "Sorry, Bette, I have a job to do," Joan Crawford whispered. She brushed an imaginary speck of dust off Davis's shoulder, walked past her, stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, and accepted the statuette for Bancroft. She held someone else's Oscar as if it were her own. She shone. She stole the show. Bette Davis stood in the shadows of the wings, watching her arch-enemy hold her dream. In that moment, something inside Bette finally broke. It was proof of her worst nightmare. Armor doesn't save you from cunning. Talent doesn't save you from politics. She realized Joan had won, even by losing the nomination. Act 6. The era of trash horror and a daughter's betrayal. After Baby Jane, there was no turning back. Hollywood saw that the image of a mad, aggressive old woman sold better than anything else. Audiences craved the humiliation of the queen. Bette Davis, needing money and fearing obscurity more than death, played by these rules. Thus began the era of hag horror or psycho biddy films. Movies rolled out one after another. Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, The Nanny, The Anniversary. In each, Bette played a variation of Baby Jane. Crazy, one-eyed, cruel, pathetic. Critics wrote, "It's a travesty of a great actress. She's selling her dignity." But Bette didn't care. She was back on top, even if that peak reeked of rot. She said, "If they want a monster, I'll give them the best monster they've ever seen." But the price was steep. The mask fused to her face. The public stopped seeing her as a dramatic actress. She became a spectacle. People came to meet her, expecting a diva, and she couldn't disappoint them. She snapped at fans, belittled interviewers, kept the fire of aggression burning because it fed her vanity. She built a fortress of sarcasm and grotesque around herself. In the 70s, she was an icon, a legend, the one and only Bette Davis. But when the lights went out, she returned to an empty home. The husbands were gone. After Gary Merrill, she swore off marriage. Friends were scarce. Only her children remained. And it was from this flank that the blow came, piercing her armor completely. A blow from which she never recovered. We approach the most terrifying paradox of Bette Davis's life. Her whole life, She built walls to protect her family from the outside world. She was sure, the enemies are out there. Inside are my people, my blood. They won't betray me. She was wrong. The main enemy grew inside the fortress, her daughter, B.D. Hyman. Bette had her late at 39. For a woman who'd had several miscarriages and abortions, B.D. was more than just a child. She was the Holy Grail. Bette smothered her with love. She controlled her every move, dressed her like a doll, dragged her to parties, chose her friends. Bette repeated her mother Ruth's script. "The world is dangerous, baby. Listen only to Mama. Mama is your only protection." But in 1985, when Bette Davis was 77, the protection crumbled. B.D. published a memoir titled My Mother's Keeper. The book hit at the worst possible time. Bette had just undergone a mastectomy, breast cancer, and a stroke. She lay in the hospital, weak, scared, needing care for the first time in her life. And then the book came out. It wasn't just a text. It was a public execution. The daughter painted Bette as a tyrant, a hysteric who wrecked her children's psyche. She described scenes of rages, despair, cruelty. B.D. essentially told the world, "You worship a monster. I lived with her in hell." Why did this happen? Here's the harsh irony. Bette Davis taught her daughter one lesson all her life. To be noticed, you must scream. To win, you must be ruthless. B.D. learned that lesson well. She used her mother's weapon against her. She realized the best way to earn money and fame was to destroy the legend named Bette Davis. Bette's reaction to this book shocked everyone. The world expected the great bitch to explode, to sue, to crush her daughter in interviews. But Bette fell silent. In her own memoirs, This and That, she published an open letter to her daughter at the very end. There were no curses, just a phrase full of childlike helplessness. "I still can't believe you did this to me. I still don't understand how my love could breed such hatred." For the first time in 50 years, the armor cracked. We saw not a warrior, but an old woman sitting on the ruins of her perfect motherhood and crying. She cut B.D. out of her will, but she couldn't cut the pain from her heart. Act 7, the final curtain falls. The last years of Bette Davis's life, from 1985 to 1989, were a chronicle of decline. But even as she unraveled, she refused to surrender. A terrifying yet majestic sight. After a stroke, part of her face lay paralyzed, her speech slurred. She withered down to about 88 pounds. Anyone else in her state would have retreated, hidden from the cameras. Bette Davis painted her lips bright red, now smeared across a crooked mouth, donned a veiled hat, clutched a cigarette in a trembling hand, and headed to a TV show. She wouldn't acknowledge her frailty. "Old age ain't for sissies," she rasped to Johnny Carson. This was her final role, the role of a survivor. She looked like a grotesque doll, a ghost of baby Jane, but her eyes still burned with the fire that lit up screens in the 30s. In 1987, she filmed her last movie, The Whales of August. Her co-star was silent film legend Lillian Gish. Lillian embodied kindness and light. She tried to befriend Bette, to comfort her. Bette hated her for it. "That woman has syrup for blood," Davis grumbled on set. "I can't stand being coddled." Even on death's doorstep, she pushed kindness away. Kindness seemed weak to her. She'd rather die alone, head held high, than let anyone see her tears and pity her. October 1989. The San Sebastian Festival, Spain. Bette Davis flew there to receive yet another award for her contribution to cinema. She felt terrible. Cancer had returned and spread. But she took the stage. The audience stood. Applause thundered for 10 minutes. She stood, leaning on a cane, a tiny, withered figure in black velvet. She soaked up the applause like oxygen. It was all she had left. The love of the crowd. Faceless, safe love that demanded no intimacy. A few days later, her condition worsened. They rushed her on a private plane to Paris, to the American hospital in Neuilly-sur-Seine. In her room, there were no husbands, no daughter BD, no old friends. Most were already dead, including Crawford and Warner. Only her assistant and son Michael remained with her. On October 6, 1989, Bette Davis's heart stopped. But before we close this book, let's remember the epitaph she chose for her gravestone. It's not a Bible quote. It's not words of love, etched in marble. She did it the hard way. Sounds heroic, right? But now, knowing her whole story, it sounds like a verdict. She chose the hard way, not because it was the only way, but because she couldn't trust the easy path. She couldn't trust people. She couldn't relax. Her whole life was a war she waged after her father left. And she won that war. She became a legend. She made everyone respect her. But she lost the peace. Bette Davis's story is more than an actress's biography. It's a warning. Today, we live in a world that demands we be strong again. Social media teaches us to be invulnerable, successful, independent. We're told, don't whine, work hard, ignore the haters. We're all slowly donning Bette Davis's armor. We learn sarcasm to hide hurt. We choose careers over relationships because a career can't wake up one morning and say, I don't love you anymore. We reject help, fearing it makes us look weak. Bette Davis proved this strategy works. You do become invulnerable. No one can hurt you if you let no one in. But the price of this safety is the icy chill of loneliness. Armor shields the heart from knife blows, but it also blocks out sunlight and the warmth of human touch. And over time, the person inside the armor just freezes to death. Bette Davis died a great actress, but she could have lived as a happy woman if she'd ever dared to remove the helmet and let someone see her fear. You expected a story about a diva who gleefully clashed with Hollywood? You got the tragedy of a scared child who never left her fortress. But wait. Bette Davis survived the studio system's meat grinder because she had fangs. But what did Hollywood do to those who couldn't bite back? Look at Judy Garland's story. The studio didn't just control her contracts. They controlled her sleep, her weight, her very blood chemistry, pumping her full of amphetamines. Bette Davis died old and alone. Judy Garland died young and broken. How did the Dream Factory become a nightmare factory for Dorothy from Oz? Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss that video.